Hi there, welcome to the latest episode of my 10-minute moan. The topic of this 10-minute moan is my old friend Humza Yousaf and some alarming emails I've uncovered, which are from the time his parents-in-law were stuck in Gaza. Just to give you a bit of background to this, for those who are not aware, the 7th of October, when Hamas invaded Israel, Humza's wife's mother and father were in Gaza visiting family. His mother-in-law is Scottish, British citizen, and his father-in-law is Palestinian. They were visiting family in Gaza as Hamas were invading Israel. Another thing that's worth knowing is during that time, Nadia, his wife, referenced her brother, who looked about the same age as her. His family, which consisted of the brother, wife, and 2 children, were in Gaza because they are Palestinian. Not, as you would think, British if it was your brother. Because they became an issue later on in the story when they wanted to get them out of Gaza. But if it was her brother, he would be British and he would have access the same as the mother and father to get out of the country. Didn't happen. I'll cover that at the end. But the brother was a doctor in apparently a UNRWA/Hamas controlled hospital in Gaza. That's key to remember. So the first email I want to show you is dated, this is very important, this first part, the 7th of October 2023, which is the day of the attacks, the initial attacks into Israel by Hamas. The time of this email is 8:25 in the morning. You need to bear this in mind. It's 8:25 a.m. UK time. And if we look at the timeline of what was happening in Gaza, in Israel as it was that day, the Supernova Music Festival was attacked at 7 a.m. Israeli time, which is 5 a.m. our time. Important key things to remember. 5 a.m. our time, Hamas troops went through that festival. I'm trying to find the first time it was covered anywhere, and it was about lunchtime. But at 5 a.m. UK time, the Hamas troops entered the music festival, which was seen as the start of this problem, which is 5 a.m. our time. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu first spoke about this at 11:35 Israeli time, which is 9:35 UK time. So we need to bear this in mind and factor this into what we're thinking here. So in 8:25 a.m, Christopher Mackey, who is Humza Yousaf's principal private secretary, wrote an email to a guy who's a director general, I believe, of the Department of External Affairs. And his email reads, Scott, many thanks for taking my call so early on a Saturday. Nobody's working. This email is at 8:25. So prior to 8:25, Humza's private secretary was phoning the gaffer of the Department of External Affairs. As we discussed, the First Minister has notified me this morning that his wife's parents are currently in Gaza and are concerned for their safety. Another keyword, given the proceedings overnight. They were visiting an elderly relative. Their names are Elizabeth El Naka, Majid El Naka. I have attached pictures of their passports in case that might be helpful. As we discussed, the First Minister would be grateful if relevant FCDO, that's Foreign Office, contacts could be aware of their presence and relevant Foreign Office advice and support could be extended to the First Minister and his wife. This can be facilitated through my office, and another name, and me, are the relevant contacts for that. Thanks again for your help, Chris. So, something that's quite amazing here. This is 8:25, and what we know is there's 2 phone calls at least taking place before this email's written, because Humza has contacted his private secretary. His private secretary has contacted the guy in the external affairs, and then he's written this email. So when these conversations took place, we can only guess, but they were before 8:25 a.m. UK time for an attack that started about 3 years earlier, and there was 2 phone calls before that time. But one of the key words in this whole email that's got me a bit like, what's going on here? Given the proceedings overnight. What proceedings overnight? What happened overnight that Humza Yousaf knew about and the rest of the world didn't? Because the rest of the world found out round about lunchtime on the Saturday. This email, 8:25, and the 2 conversations before it, and Humza knew something overnight. Given the proceedings overnight. What proceedings? Now, there's a few crazy things to figure out here. I'm quite sure when things like this kick off, people within, special agents, etc., from governments all around the world will know about these things. Not immediately, but almost immediately. And foreign powers all around the world would know before the news. Okay? Scottish government do not have any powers of foreign policy. And it would suggest to me that even if he was tipped off by the British government, it wouldn't happen as the things were happening live halfway around the world. I'm quite sure the Prime Minister of United Kingdom, USA, all these countries that have foreign powers, foreign policy powers, would have known before you and I. You and I found out at lunchtime. So between 5 a.m, when the first person went through into that festival, that's 5 a.m. UK time. In that, from 5 a.m. till 8:25, Humza Yousaf was made aware of this, phoned his private secretary. His private secretary phoned and got somebody, early in the morning on a Saturday, phoned the guy in the Department of External Affairs, and then constructed an email by which point he'd managed to secure photographs of the passports for Elizabeth and Majid. So when did Humza know about these attacks on Israel? Now, how did he know? Now, I'm not going to say, if your in-laws were abroad and something happened. Let's say Tunisia was, remember the infamous story with the Tunisian hotels getting attacked? There's a lot of British people there. I know people that were in that hotel. Now, if that was to happen at 9 o'clock, and our news station started putting out at 11 o'clock, something like that, I'm quite sure people would be concerned immediately. But his in-laws were in an area where there was frequent acts of violence and things like that. So if your first notification was at 5 o'clock, the minute, which is impossible by the way, but the minute the first person went through the gate of that festival, your initial reaction wouldn't be, I better get my mum and dad out of the place, because things like that kind of happened all the time. It was hours later before we understood the severity of the situation. And it was even the Israeli forces, I'm just trying to get the timescale, they didn't even react to it immediately. They weren't aware. Right. And timescale, it was 7:40, confirmed that militants had entered southern Israel and asked residents of other cities to remain indoors. Sirens were activated in Jerusalem at 8:15, which is 6:15 our time. And at 8:23, Israel declared this alert of war, activating its reservists. 8:23 their time, 6:23 our time. Friday going into Saturday. How did they know? And more importantly, what did they know? So that's the first email out of two that I want to discuss. The second email is dated October the 11th, 4 days later. And in this, the sending address has been fully redacted. Now, what that tells me when you're looking at these documents, it's not UK Scottish Government official, because if it was, you would not redact the full email address. You would at least have the ScotGov, UK Gov bit at the end. You might have the name in certain instances redacted, but you don't have the full email address redacted. In this email, dated the 11th of October, I have contacted two of your constituencies. Now, I don't understand the meaning of that word. I think it might be a foreign person, an even worse understanding of vocabulary than me, because it doesn't make sense. I have contacted two of your constituencies this morning to see if Humza's wife's parents are still in Gaza, as we have guys on the ground escorting people out of the region. If we can be of any assistance, please contact myself here in Scotland at present, and obviously a redacted phone number, or another redacted phone number, on the ground with teams in the region. Regards. And their name's been redacted. Now, the pretty crazy things here are, this looks to me as if it's somebody formed, because they're saying they're here in Scotland at present, so it sounds as if they're not really based here. They've already got people on the ground within 72 hours of these atrocities. They had people on the ground offering to help Humza, or Humza's wife's parents, to be more exact. Who's offering to help? Now, some people suggested, well, it could be some of these volunteer groups that go, when there's human tragedies, like earthquakes and things, and they get out. They were there within 72 hours of this. The actual war hadn't really kicked off by this point, if you remember, because Israel gave the Gazaans warning to get out of the Gaza city because they were going for it. It didn't happen the next day. It was almost a week. But this mob, whoever they are, have got people on the ground escorting people out of the region. And I'd love to know who they are. Now, the other thing that I spoke about earlier that I touched on was this secret brother, that's, well, a suggested brother, who it's impossible that it's his brother. Nadia's brother. Nadia being Humza's wife. Because if it was a brother, full brother, she would have a British passport the same as Nadia. She would be a British citizen, because to have a British mother. And I think that's key. This guy didn't. So I think this guy is a half-brother, which is fine. We've all got things like that in our families. It's kind of modern society we live in, which normally would suggest to people that Nadia's dad had a wife or a relationship before he met Nadia's mother. And normally, the half-brother or sister, there's a bit of an age gap. But they look the same age. So I think it's possible, I don't know, some traditions in some countries where you might have it with two wives. I don't know if that's what's going on here with Nadia's dad or not, but who am I? But what we do know about him is he was a doctor in a hospital in the area. And once the mum and dad came out the area, we then had this sort of politicising of the situation to try and get the brother, his wife and his two kids out safely. At that time, Nadia, who's a councillor in Dundee, was amazingly invited to a women's delegation, a big conference in Turkey, where there was lots of partners, people, in high positions, female only, where she met the Turkish Prime Minister's wife. Now, this is purely coincidental, obviously, but days after that, there was orders given to allow Nadia's brother, wife and two children safe passage to Turkey, sponsored by the Turkish government. That paper found its way to Gaza. One name was removed from the list, and the wife and two children, the last we heard, were on their way and into Turkey. And then we had this thing about, can we bring them to Scotland, please, because it's our family, and don't really know what happened there. That's where the sort of news stopped with that situation. But the brother, inverted commas brother, was still, last we all heard, in Gaza, working in a UN RWA stroke Hamas occupied hospital. Let me just remind you that Humza kinda knew everything before the rest of us. Bit crazy, isn't it? So if you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you've not already done so, please hit the subscribe and notifications button. But most importantly of all, unless you're one of these people that surprisingly knows everything before anybody else. Not you, but
everyone else. Have a great day. Cheerio, bye now.